Hey guys, I am Vladimir Putin. You must know me as a famous man. It's 11:07 p.m. A concrete room somewhere beneath a command site outside Moscow. The air is cool and dry. The ventilation hum is the only thing that never argues back. On the wall, paper maps with grease pencil arrows drawn, rubbed out, drawn again. On the screens, radar tracks slide like slow rain. On the table, black tea gone cold, 3 unopened energy bars, a handful of pencils, and a stack of folders with the corners bent from being thumbed too often. We wrapped a briefing 20 minutes ago. I mostly listened. Valery Gerasimov took the ground picture apart with the surgeons, patients, pressure points, supply arteries, where you cut and where you simply let the pressure do the work. Andrei Belousov walked the numbers, the plants, the shifts, the shells, the small arithmetic that decides whether tomorrow arrives on time or a day later. Alexander Bortnikov read the inside temperature, what's quiet, what's pretending to be quiet, who needs a knock on the door, and who only needs to see a door open down the hall. Sergei Narishkin mapped the outside table, who smiles, who stalls, who needs time more than they admit. Sergei Shoigu sat a little apart, taking notes, saying very little. Sometimes silence is a report of its own. They speak. I decide. Not loudly. Raising my voice is something I do only when I want to waste it. The room is empty now, just me and the watch and the hum. The samovar ticks itself to sleep. A night aide offered fresh tea. I told him no. I needed less. I'm tired, not sleepy. There's a difference. Sleep is mercy. Tired is data. Sit with me a few minutes. No ceremony, no anthem. Just a man in his 70s with a watch he trusts more than applause. I'll tell you why I don't hurry, why pauses cost more than they look, and why I listen to my generals and my economists and then price their words against the one thing none of them can control: time. Before we go anywhere, let me say how power works here, because without that nothing else makes sense. Power in Russia is not a personality trait. It is a grammar. Order is the language. Fear is the punctuation. Loyalty is rentable. Deterrence is owned. I reward predictability. I punish experiments. I don't need to be loved. I need the rules to be understood. Abroad, they call it a cult. I call it risk management. Affection is volatile. The signal must not be. Forgiveness is expensive. Memory is cheap. That isn't poetry. That's maintenance. You can run a village on applause, not a country. A country runs on clarity. Who decides, who obeys, who pretends, who stops pretending. You keep that clear, and even enemies adjust their behavior. You let it blur, and your friends begin to improvise, and improvisation at scale is a form of sabotage. People confuse strength with volume. Strength is a sentence everyone in the system can finish without looking up. Now, about the war and calendars, there's a Western habit of asking for dates as if wars were gift boxes with bows. A long war does 3 things I need. First, it coheres the country. Attention is a wild animal. War puts it on a leash. 100 small irritations become one named objective. Noise falls into a pattern people can carry. Second, it filters elites. A crisis squeezes out the soft metal. You learn who brings solutions and who brings slogans, who turns in minutes and who turns in invoices. I don't have to guess, the months tell me. Third, it slows the other side. Democracies run on budgets and attention spans. Both have ceilings. A long war pushes them toward the ceiling. They shout, I count. You've heard about a war dividend. Defense orders hum. Some job charts behave. Yes, that exists. No, that isn't why I keep going. That is a byproduct, not the steering wheel. There are costs, and I can list them without blinking. Prices higher than I prefer, rates set where I'd rather not have them, labor gaps, fiscal strain that demands discipline instead of speeches. I carry these because they purchase leverage. I negotiate from motion, not from pause. A factory humming is cosmetic. A position is something you can spend. I would trade 10 growth headlines for 1 kilometer that no one will take from me with a paragraph and a handshake. Since everyone brings up the early days, I'll handle that cleanly. The 40-mile convoy north of Kiev, visible from space, was a lesson spelled in diesel. We rewrote logistics, dispersion, fuel, discipline, mission type orders, spread the vehicles, shorten commands so you don't radio for the right to breathe, push authority down so a captain doesn't wait for a colonel to move a truck. They laughed at the jam. I redrew the map. We began as a blitz and shifted to attrition. That isn't romance, it's policy. Speed is fragile, pressure lasts. Attrition is not doing nothing. It is doing the same thing until the other side runs out of breath. Every inch forward on the line is half an inch less I need to surrender at the table. The map is a scale. The mouth should weigh what the scale reads. And because no one in this building plays make-believe, let me talk about drones and deep strikes. Airfields heat, depots burning, a bomber on fire on a runway inside my borders. Shame is a teacher. We took the class. 3 actions: disperse, harden, deceive. Split assets, harden what can be hardened. Pull their eyes onto decoys. There is no 100% in war. I knew that before this office. I know it again now. Face is cheap, options are expensive. So we changed basing. We layered air defense. We wrote new habits and burned the old checklists that pretended the weather never changes. That is what shame is for changing habits, not changing stories. Since we're speaking plainly, the border myth cracked too. People enjoy repeating that the homeland is untouchable. It's a comforting sentence. Comfort is not policy. A raid here, a publicity raid there, myth punctured. I peel events into 2 piles, emotion and dispatch. Pull the line back into place. Keep the story from running off the road. I do not need to win every detail. I need the overall slope to tilt my way. A border is a line. A state is stamina. Lines wiggle. Stamina must not. You're going to ask about the man who mistook proximity for immunity, so I'll answer once and not again. That episode didn't unsettle me. It tested the signal. The reply had to be clear enough that the whole hierarchy
heard the same sentence at the same time. Afterward, I tightened a few screws. Access is not amnesty. Fondness doesn't outrank fear. In a system like mine, fear keeps doing its job when fondness gets bored. I don't need every face to smile. I need every hand to stay on its assigned tool. A government is a machine. Machines don't run on hugs. Let me talk about the outside table now, how I read the West and, yes, the East. I read the West clinically. The United States is powerful, distracted, polarized. Budgets have ceilings. Attention does too. Europe speaks values loudly and factories quietly. Energy, industry, elections, the boring levers that actually move a continent. They sell a word called security. I buy a commodity called position. Sometimes you can trade the two. Sometimes the market is closed. A ceasefire is often a reload if your friends are rich. You call it a pause. You use it to train, refit, and shop under a clean label. That is not peace. That is rearming in a tuxedo. My simple rules stay the same. I accept inspections for territory I keep. I reject umbrellas that let my opponent rearm under my windows. I talk when the line moves my way. But the world isn't only West. The West sells statements. The East buys positions. One side prints communiques. The other settles invoices. I romanticize neither. China writes in two layers. Publicly, careful nouns, promote talks, avoid spillover, stabilize. Privately, the handwriting is an accountant's. Energy flows, components, machine tools, electronics, routes that don't snap every other Tuesday, settlement in yuan when it suits both ledgers. They won't carry my rifle or pay every bill to the last day. They want supply chains that don't break and a map that doesn't rip. I respect caution. Caution is a kind of strength. The banner says, friendship, the invoice draws borders. What I need is time, and what they help create is the breathing room time can buy. If you want thunder, look elsewhere. If you want calendars that don't seize up, look here. There are partners who draw with thicker lines. Outsiders argue over nouns. Engineers, volunteers, instructors, let them argue. What matters is posture. They sent people. They made their stance legible. They honored their dead at home and loudly. That is grief, and it is a message. We carried some of your weight. Remember that when we knock. I remember.
The IOU exists. An IOU is not an instant payout. Payout depends on timing, direction, and the total ledger. I write their line in the book without handcuffing myself with public vows.
Adults do business that way with ledgers, not vows. They are counting too. Good. Clarity is sturdier than romance. Since everyone wants to mediate this year, I'll tell you how that looks from my chair. I attend, I listen, I don't chase communiques. Alaska was the same in a colder room. We spoke for hours. There were no signatures. They left with headlines. I left with time. Someone told cameras he was very angry. Anger is the cheapest chip on the table. I cared where the pressure went next. After that, you watched it lean toward Kiev. You need to make a deal. That sentence is not an agreement. It's a direction. Directions outlast microphones. You want my short view on Trump before and after? Before he returned, I expected American assistance to slow, because Americans enjoy arguing with themselves. That was half right. Pipelines kink and unkink with their quarrels. Guarantees change shape, not purpose. They rename the umbrella. It still keeps rain off my opponent. After he returned, the rhetoric sped up and the arrangements did too. No Article 5, but something that rhymes with it. Fine. I treat it as rearmament by another name. So I go back to the only metric I trust, inches. His anger is cheap. My inches are not. Advance an inch. Ask for half an inch less at the table. Repeat. If you want to know how I think about risk, it's simpler than commentary makes it. There is an escalation ladder. I stand on certain rungs and make sure others see it. I don't love brinkmanship. I value option value. People demand red lines. I prefer stairs. You don't win by jumping stairs. You win by owning the handrail. Opponents should see my hand on a clear rung and adjust their footing. So should my own house commanders, ministers, bankers. The hand, the rung, the pace. Pictures like that save lives and buy time. The war is not only shells and maps, it's also attention. You wage it in newsrooms and feeds and in the fatigue of people who don't want to think about you anymore. I don't obsess over that theater, but I don't ignore it. I don't need to persuade the other side's audience. I only need to keep my own audience from accepting the other side's sentences as if they were their own. Television is the thermostat you set the temperature so the room doesn't melt or freeze. Law is the switch on when it matters, off when it wastes. Rituals are glue. You make people stand together long enough for habits to take over. This isn't mysticism, it's maintenance. In the economy, you hold the bones together, floor wages where the skeleton lives, mobilized by quotas and by exemptions so that the state stays a state and not a drain. When people leave, you absorb it into a story, ambition, adventure, disappointment. When they return, you seat them where they do more good than harm. I don't need chorus. I need directional silence. People ask for stability. They settle for predictable. Predictable is a form of kindness you can afford even in a war. Since Partners keeps returning to the conversation, I'll speak ledger again and then move on. No limits is a banner. The general ledger is the truth. Energy parts, finance workarounds, local currency settlement. If it works, I use it. Gratitude is a poem. Settlements are prose. China's value to me isn't thunder. It's time roots that don't snap, components that don't evaporate, payments that don't ask permission from Washington. They maintain a careful public posture while keeping the private machinery oiled enough that my calendar doesn't seize. I repay caution with caution. That's how large states avoid expensive mistakes. North Korea draws thicker lines, people sent, losses honored, message delivered. I stack those IOUs with the rest and choose when and how to pay. A debt is a lever for both sides, not a pair of handcuffs for either. You want detail on the so-called war dividend suspicion, the one that says I won't stop because war pays? Here's the honest version. Some metrics shine. That's true. But they do not dictate my schedule. What dictates it is simple. The geometry of the front, the practical recognition of that geometry by people who matter, and domestic order. If the fiscal curve, the manpower curve, and the tech attrition curve all bend decisively against me at once, I recalculate. Before that, I don't. That isn't stubbornness, it's pricing.
Factories can hum. Maps decide. If 1 kilometer of hard ground saves me a year of soft debate, I'll buy the kilometer.
Since people like end states, I'll give you something plainer, an end grammar. Acceptable looks like this: a neighbor with a neutral posture and a long non-NATO horizon. The facts on the ground acknowledged in practice, even if not applauded in prose. No canopy that lets the other side rebuild an army under my windows. Unacceptable is simple: 2 orders to roll back what is already taken and paid for. Paper victories I can't explain at home. A remote control planted at my doorstep with a friendly label. You can call that ugly. I call it stable. Stability is a currency. It spends. There are things I tell myself at night because they don't change when slogans change. Who hurries, pays, that's the first. The party that needs the result today buys it at tomorrow's price. The second, soft words change nothing without hard positions. Keep the positions. The third, a pause is never just a pause. Someone always uses it to move. If I must choose, I prefer to be the one moving. People misread calm as softness. Calm isn't soft. It is a way to use time without spilling it. When I don't raise my voice, it isn't because I have nothing to say. It's because the sentence is already written, and everyone in the chain knows the next word. Noise is expensive. Certainty is cheaper once you've paid for it with discipline. You want the inner arithmetic, the part with the feelings that aren't supposed to matter. Fine. I feel the weight of names. Lists arrive. I read them. There is a cost to every centimeter of map, and I count it in human units before I price it in strategic ones. That doesn't mean the map stops. It means I don't lie to myself about what moves the map. People talk about conscience as if it were a siren. Mine is a metronome. It keeps time so I don't pretend losses are free. A leader without a metronome becomes a speaker for an audience of mirrors. I run a state, not a theater. There is family in this story, not banners people. Mothers who send sons with straight backs and eyes that don't know what they will see. Wives who measure weeks by the rhythm of calls that arrive and the emptiness of weeks when they don't talk about them on stage, because speeches are the cheapest gift you can give to grief. I honor them in the only currency that matters in my job. I try not to waste them. Waste is blasphemy in war. Waste is the sin you can't confess away. You want to know about the nights when the phone doesn't go back on the cradle because the updates step on each other like waves? Those are the nights I shorten sentences. The longer a sentence, the more places it can hide. Short sentences move trucks and guns and doctors. Short sentences tell a commander the one thing he must not get wrong. On those nights, the watch grows loud. I listen. I don't pray. I count. Counting is how a secular state remembers it is mortal. And yes, there is anger, controlled anger. Not the kind that burns through decisions, the kind that sands them smooth. When someone in the chain performs a ritual instead of a task, when a report replaces a reality, anger does the sanding. And when the sanding is done, the person is done. I don't lecture. I end the conversation. The system learns faster when the silence after a mistake is permanent.
The West keeps asking why I sound cold about ceasefires. I don't hate the word, I hate the way it gets used. A pause is a reload if your friends are rich and your logistics are Western.
A pause is a trap if you live next to the battlefield and the other side owns the paperwork. I have agreed to pauses when they bought me something I could hold in my hand. I have refused them. When they bought me headlines, I would have to pay back with ground. There is nothing mystical here. It's a shop, not a shrine. I hear the speculation about health, about age, about whether a man in his 70s can still think in terms of the next decade. That's a Western anxiety thinking age steals patience or ambition. Age doesn't steal patience. It buys it. You learn which minutes you can sell and which minutes you must lock in a safe. I would rather be an old man with a watch than a young man with a drum. Drums are for parades, watches are for states. And because you'll wonder, yes, I remember the city where hunger was a science and winter had more authority than any uniform. If you grow up in that memory, you learn two permanent lessons. First, that suffering is not an argument but a measurement. Second, that the people who outlast cold are the ones who treat warmth as a tool, not a mood. Those lessons don't make headlines, but they keep cabinets from collapsing. Do I want peace? I want a position that makes peace a maintenance task instead of a miracle. Miracles fail inspection. Maintenance passes it. Peace that rests on goodwill alone is a string you cannot see until it snaps. Peace that rests on geometry is a bolt you can check with a wrench. I prefer bolts to strings. I'm a mechanic by temperament. Mechanics don't pray for engines, they torque them. If you ask me what I fear, I'll give you a practical answer. I fear drift. Drift is when a process keeps moving after the decision has ended. Drift makes villains out of clerks and cowards out of professionals, because no one wants to admit the machine is moving by itself. I cut drift. If a process outlives its decision, I cut the process. If a person confuses his seat for the state, I cut the person. Fear is punctual when drift is late. There's a question Western journalists like because it flatters them. What keeps you up at night? The answer is simple. Nothing keeps me up at night. I either work or I sleep. What wakes me is the watch. It says, today you lose a little, tomorrow you gain a little, but if you give the other side your calendar, you will give them your map. I don't give calendars away. You want a line about China that isn't a slogan? Caution. That's the line. Caution. That keeps routes open, keeps components moving, keeps payments from asking permission. They're not romantic about me. I'm not romantic about them. We price each other. The price today is time. The price tomorrow may be something more explicit. We'll see. Business is cleaner than friendship in international life because business leaves receipts. Receipts are easier to read than memories. You want a line about North Korea that isn't hysteria? Signal. That's the line. Signal sent in bodies and in ceremonies. Signal received. Depths noted. Depths scheduled, not blurted. Adults don't cash every chip the moment they win it. They save some for when the table turns loud. As for Europe, there's a simple filter I apply: winter. If a European sentence can survive winter prices and winter ballots, it's a sentence I may have to respect. If it cannot, it's music. Beautiful, perhaps. Not binding. Last year I watched sentences melt. This year I'm watching which ones refreeze. Some of you want romance from leaders, sudden conversions, speeches with wet eyes. I don't do conversions. I do conversions of energy into leverage, of leverage into geometry, of geometry into sentences. A bureaucracy can execute without art. I don't own the weather, only the roof. A good roof is better than a good speech. The night aide just passed the door again and pretended not to look in. He's young enough to think tired means weak. One day he'll learn tired can mean ready. Ready people don't rush. Ready people price. So let me put the pricing model on the table one last time. When I weigh a proposal, I count inches, not adjectives. When I listen to anger, I sort it into cheap and durable. When I'm offered a pause, I ask who gets to move during the pause. When I'm offered a plan, I look for the bolt, not the string. When I hear the word trust, I reach for the ledger. You want to know when I stop? When the price matches the position I want. When the position explains itself without my voice holding it up. When time stops being my friend and starts warning me. I haven't heard that warning yet. The room is quieter than it was an hour ago. The watch is louder. That's fine. Watches are honest. They don't negotiate, they don't flatter, they don't perform, they move. I don't raise my voice. I don't have to. The sentence is already written. The system knows the next word. Now I'll sleep if sleep wants me. Morning arrives whether the night behaves or not. The watch doesn't rush me. I don't rush the watch, and the clock keeps good time.